Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirikoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my hidden gems for Week 11 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Now, after the snap that occurred on Thursday Night Football, many of us began to realize that some of our stud prospects in our lineups have begun to disappear. And with that, many of our lineups going into Week 11 may not be suited to win and help us get to our 2021 fantasy football championship game and into the playoffs. But in order to go ahead and reestablish our lineups, we're going to go ahead and look across the entire multiverse of the fantasy football landscape through different timelines, at different planets, on different teams, in order to collect these 6 hidden gems across the fantasy football landscape. Of course, to help us do that, we'll get the assistance of Underdog Fantasy, a superhero in their own right, who will be helping me collect these 6 hidden gems. Many of the players that I'll be talking about today are typically rostered in less than 30% of leagues across Yahoo formats. So I wanted to go ahead, suggest these players, make sure you get them in your lineups, and make sure you reestablish your 2021 Week 11 rosters in order to give yourself the best chance to win this week. I want to thank you guys for continuing to support the channel. For those of you who are new here, we're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the season. Of course, if you have not yet already, subscribe. Also, check out Underdog Fantasy. Besides them helping us out today via the 6 hidden gems, but also go ahead and travel to underdogfantasy.com in order to pick some hidden gems via their pick'em slips. Again, there are many players, whether it's picking over or under, that you can go ahead and string together 5 in a row accurately this week and 20 times your money. Outside of that, I'll also go ahead and draft a team for this weekend's Battle Royale on Sunday. There's a lot of fun to be had at Underdog Fantasy, so if you want to go ahead and sign up today, use promo code Andrew. Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. The link is down in the description for those of you who are interested. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into our 6 hidden gems for this week. Of course, we're going to be traveling to different planets, different teams, and in order to collect the Power Stone this week, we're not going to decimate Xandar. Instead, we are going to travel to San Francisco in order to collect the Power Stone via Jeff Wilson Jr. Going into this Sunday's matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, the entire conversation regarding the 49ers has surrounded around whether or not Elijah Mitchell is going to be healthy and ready to play. For those of you who are managers of Elijah Mitchell, you know he had broken his finger in the game against the Los Angeles Rams this last week. Of course, they had to put a pin in it, and the likelihood of him not playing is extremely high, considering, of course, they perhaps don't even need him against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they need to make sure that a running back who needs to protect the ball with his arm and hand, and he's not going to do anything to potentially jeopardize his health for the rest of the season. So Jeff Wilson Jr. is most likely going to be the starting running back here, as we've seen Jeff Wilson even last week get himself over 10 touches, which is obviously a promising sign considering there will be no Jermichael Hasty, and of course Trey Sermon has pretty much fallen out of favor. He might as well be a practice squad guy at this point. Jeff Wilson Jr. is currently only being started in 33% of leagues right now, and that, in my opinion, is an extremely low number considering all the factors that are the 49ers backfield. Specifically, this season alone, the 49ers have the 13th most rushing yards amongst all teams in the National Football League. Second, they have the 8th most rushing touchdowns in the entire National Football League with 11. On top of that, in terms of the running back position alone, because we know Deebo Samuel can run the ball, we've seen, of course, Trey Lance run the ball for this team this season already. But specifically the running back position for the 49ers, they're averaging about 90 rushing yards per game, but they're getting a bunch of carries per game, over 20. So if that favor is going to go in the direction of Jeff Wilson Jr. against such an easy matchup like the Jacksonville Jaguars front seven, then I believe there's a very good position in which Jeff Wilson Jr. is not only going to have himself a good game, but perhaps even a great game and get himself into the category of being a top 15 running back in a half PPR scoring format. The last time we saw Jeff Wilson Jr. as the starting running back of the San Francisco 49ers backfield, well, of course, that was in 2020. And from weeks 14 through 17, he was the number 5 overall running back in fantasy. He was averaging 17.52 fantasy points per game throughout that stretch of games, and he had scored 5 total touchdowns and was given 85 opportunities between weeks 14 through 17. They are not afraid of giving this man touches. They've been waiting for him to return to the lineup so they can give him said opportunity. And luckily for us, the hardest choices often require the strongest of wills, and we'll definitely have that this week, as we'll have Jeff Wilson. Anyway, thank you very much. Moving on. All right, we're going to talk about our Space Stone next. We're talking about Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys, as this week we are going to see Amari Cooper out, and perhaps even next week on the Thursday Night Football game, of course, on Thanksgiving Day, we may also see Amari Cooper out. So what kind of opportunity is Michael Gallup going to potentially see? Well, in the next 2 games, we'll have Michael Gallup taking on the Kansas City Chiefs and Las Vegas Raiders, 2 secondaries that, in my opinion, can very easily be exposed and, really rack up a lot of points for a guy like Michael Gallup, who has been injured for majority of the season. Now, for many of you who were able to go ahead and stash him in your injured reserve spot or held on to him in order to believe that he could potentially have himself a breakout, year the rest of the way, you potentially have pretty much struck a gold mine here, as Amari Cooper has pretty much been the number 2 wide receiver. And what kind of opportunity are we going to potentially see out of Michael Gallup? He's currently only being started in 27% of leagues. And the last time we saw Michael Gallup as a huge contributor to this offense, it really was in 2019, where he had an incredible season in which he had 66 catches, 1,107 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, and had 179.7 total fantasy points. He was averaging 12.84 fantasy points per game in the 14 games he played in 2019. That wasn't too long ago. Obviously, in 2020, the addition of CeeDee Lamb and the subtraction of Dak Prescott from the lineup obviously did impede him from getting more growth within that offense. But now that he's going to be given the opportunity to play the second overall wide receiver spot in this offense once again, I think Michael Gallup's ceiling is extremely high, especially considering these secondaries that he's going to be taking on have been suffering and struggling all season long. Michael Gallup is an incredible play, and the sky's the limit, and that is why he is our space stone for this upcoming week. Moving on to our reality stone. The ether is in the form of Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay is a guy that we've talked about via the hidden gems this season already. He's currently only being started in 17% of leagues, and the reason I wanted to talk about him is because the reality of the situation is, this entire Giants offense is beginning to get healthier and healthier as the weeks persist, but they still need a number 1 receiving option. With Sterling Shepard once again missing out this upcoming week as they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary on Monday Night Football, it leads me to believe that Kenny Golladay perhaps is going to be finally fully healthy and ready to go. I mean, the last time we saw him fully healthy this season, he had an incredible game against the New Orleans Saints. 7 targets, 6 catches, 116 receiving yards for 14.6 total half PPR fantasy points. Now, like I mentioned, they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We all know they are one of the worst secondaries in the National Football League, not based on their talent, but based on the injuries that they've gone ahead and faced this season already. They're giving up the 12th most points, which is 29.83 fantasy points per game this season in the 9 games that they've already played. So what could we potentially anticipate from a secondary like this? I expect Jamel Dean to be covering Kenny Golladay. And though he has been the best corner in that entire secondary as of the group that is healthy at this current moment in time, he still gives up a bunch of yards. Even last week against the Washington football team, in terms of his individual coverage, he gave up 5 catches for 78 yards. When we talk about a player like Kenny Golladay, who has the ability to go deep, be a red zone threat, and be the number 1 receiving option of a Daniel Jones offense, I think there's a lot of potential to be had here again. This defense already has given up 123 receptions, 1,468 receiving yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season. I think there's a very good chance that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will have their hands full with Kenny Golladay. Moving on to our next hidden gem, we have Rashod Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, as of earlier today, the information was divulged that Marquise Hollywood Brown will not be participating and playing this weekend. And what does that mean? Well, that means Rashod Bateman is even better of a play going into this week. Only currently started in 32% of leagues. I think that number is absolutely going to jump, and it should be jumping very quickly here. I mean, in the last 4 weeks, he's seen 6 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets. Getting himself that kind of opportunity as it's continued to grow, being able to surpass 80 receiving yards in 2 out of the last 3 games. He's been able to, in a full PPR, surpass 10 plus fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. The opportunity continues to build, and if in fact we're not going to see Marquise Hollywood Brown in this offense, well, let's talk about what exactly Marquise Hollywood Brown has seen. Not only has he been the deep threat, but he's also seen a boatload of targets. Last week against the Miami Dolphins, that man saw 13 total targets. If those numbers are going to go in the direction, or at least trickle in the direction of a Rashod Bateman, and he'll take his 6 to 8 targets per game and kind of jump to the next level, get himself to 10 to 12 targets, then by all means, he will have incredible opportunity. And that is why he's the soul stone, because the sacrifice must be made. And Marquise Brown is going to be missing this week with his thigh injury. Luckily for Rashod Bateman as well, they take on the 4th easiest matchup at the wide receiver position, playing against the Chicago Bears secondary, who have given up 114 receptions, 1,673 receiving yards, and 12 receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers. It's 33.42 fantasy points per game given up to opposing wide receivers. And if Lamar Jackson's ready to go and ready to sling the ball, then of course, his number 1 wide receiver is going to be Rashod Bateman. And this week's Soul Stone is going to be a great option for us. Moving on to our next hidden gem, we have the Time Stone. Now, dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same. We have pretty much been waiting for a running back in this Tennessee Titans backfield to establish themselves as the apparent heir to the throne of King Henry. And unfortunately, we haven't seen a running back do that just yet. But I think this week, as the Houston Texans take on the Tennessee Titans, this former Houston Texans running back is going to have a little bit of a revenge game of sorts, as he is currently playing for the Tennessee Titans, and he is going to have himself an incredible opportunity to have himself not only just a good game, but perhaps an establishing game that pretty much makes him the starter until Derrick Henry returns. Last week, Foreman played the most snaps amongst all running backs for the Tennessee Titans. In fact, he had the most touches amongst all running backs of the Tennessee Titans as they took on the New Orleans Saints' very tough run-stopping defense. I mean, he had 11 carries for 30 yards, 2 catches on 2 receptions for 48 receiving yards. Getting himself involved in the receiving game is fantastic, but that's not what we pretty much are investing in Foreman for. We want him to run the ball, and we want this Tennessee Titans to impose their will like we know that they absolutely can. And luckily, they take on the Houston Texans, like I mentioned, who are giving up the 4th most fantasy points on rushing stats alone, which means rushing touchdowns and rushing yards. This season already, they've given up 1,073 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. So on the ground, per game, they're giving up 17.26 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. If Foreman is going to be given the opportunity, like we expect to be the starting running back of this team, well, it's only a matter of time until he takes the starting position and runs away with it. And that's what I expect him to do this upcoming week. Moving on to our final hidden gem for this week, it is Adam Trautman of the New Orleans Saints. Now, Adam Trautman is a tight end that many of you may be overlooking, but for those of you who are in an extremely deep league and perhaps are going to be missing the services of Noah Fant, or perhaps a Tyler Higbee this week, and you don't know who to pick up, and there really isn't much value out there, well, I think Adam Trautman is a good option. I mean, in comparison to all leagues, I don't think he even has a rostership over 5%, much less being started in any leagues at this current moment. But in the last 3 games, he has had a total of 19 targets. And I'm not going to just brush over that and ignore it. Opportunity is opportunity. And like I always mention, opportunity leads to success in fantasy football. And it's only a matter of time until Adam Trautman takes the next step forward and takes these 6.7 and 5.7 fantasy point performances and jumps to the next level. Luckily for him, he takes on the Philadelphia Eagles this week that are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends on an average of 15.41 fantasy points per game. They've allowed 8 receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends this season, and just the recent performances, let's talk about them. Albert Okwuegbunam, 3 catches, 77 yards, while Noah Fant in the same game, 5 catches, 59 yards. The Los Angeles Chargers trio, Anderson had 4 catches, 39 and a touchdown. Jared Cook, 4 catches for 48. Donald Parham, 3 catches, 39 and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson, 10 catches for 89. Foster Moreau, 6 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. OJ Howard, 6 catches, 49 yards and a touchdown. They cannot stop tight ends. Opposing offensive coordinators know this. And I'm sure Sean Payton is already locked into that. And he's going to get Adam Trautman opportunities. And he certainly is going to hopefully be able to deliver on them for us. Those are our 6 hidden gems for week 11 of the 2021 fantasy football season. But now that Underdog has helped us collect our 6 hidden gems across the multiverse and across the fantasy football landscape, let's go ahead and travel to a different plane of existence. Let's travel to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use promo code Andrew. Of course, if you do so today while signing up, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. And let's go ahead and put together some pick'em slips. Let's draft a team for this Sunday's Battle Royale, and let's find ourselves at the top winning some money. Let's do that. Now that we're here at UnderdogFantasy.com, I of course want to once again re-explain the pick'ems format and how it works. If you're able to successfully guess over or under on a specific stat line, like let's say, for example, on the very top here, we have Tyrod Taylor passing yards, over or under 231.5 passing yards. If he's able to go over that number or under, and you're able to accurately predict that for 5 potential players, you're able to 20 times your overall money. So let's go ahead and put together some pick'em slips. I, of course, always want to get my hidden gems and put those together in a pick'em slip, and then we'll go ahead and diagnose the entire rest of these players. But my goodness, there's already a lot. Look how many Houston Texans there are on this list, much less. But either way, let's go ahead and scroll through here and find the players that I was mentioning. First and foremost, Foreman. We'll take the over on this. I know Adrian Peterson's certainly there, but even Underdog Fantasy understands that Foreman is the main back in this backfield. Certainly going to have a lot of value there. Hopefully Rashod Bateman will pop up in the future here. Continuing to scroll through, we're looking for, where is Mr. Jeff Wilson Jr.? Because that is another one that I'm very interested in trying to get myself a pick'em slip on. Continuing to roll through. Again, there's so many pick'ems here. It's taking me forever to find them. Holy moly. We're going to roll through. Jeff Wilson Jr., 77.5 yards. I'll take the over on that. Continuing on. We have the Las Vegas Raiders, of course. Michael Gallup, where are you? Michael Gallup, 55.5 receiving yards. We'll take the over on that as well. Okay, who am I missing again? We had Adam Trautman. So where the heck is that Saints game? I got to scroll back up to the top here. Where did I? Okay, here we go. Adam Trautman, 29.5. All right, so we have 4. We had Jeff Wilson as the Power Stone. We had Michael Gallup as the Space Stone. Oh, we had Kenny Golladay. Where art thou, Kenny Golladay? It's the Monday night game, so it's not up yet. So then we also had Rashod Bateman. That is missing. Okay, so at this point, we've got 4 hidden gems. We'll go ahead. We'll put in a $10 bet to 10 times our money and go ahead and maybe end up with $100 this weekend, which is hopefully going to be the case. Again, bet responsibly. Whether you're fading my specific picks or trailing, be responsible in understanding, these aren't guarantees, to say the very least. Either way, let's put together our first pick and slip for this week. And let's go ahead and look at some of these other numbers and see what exactly interests me and what other pick and slips I can go ahead and put together and find for this upcoming week. All right, as we proceed to kind of roll down this list, there are a bunch that are actually not bad at all. I mean, to be honest, there's 20 receiving yards from Sammy Watkins really doesn't seem like out of the realm of the possibility, considering there is no Marquise Hollywood Brown. So I really do think that is a automatic smash in that regard. Maybe I should have put him in to the prior slip to 20 times my money, but either way, we're continuing on. I think there's a very good chance in which Joe Flacco actually throws an interception, especially against the Miami Dolphins of all defense. So I'm going to take the over on a half of an interception. I think he'll actually throw an interception. We'll continue to roll down. I think considering Mark Ingram is going to be the starter this week, playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, we all know that the Philadelphia Eagles, they give up a fair share of rushing yards every single week in the National Football League. This is very easily a number that I'm interested in taking, but I'll roll down, see if there's anything else that kind of pops out, makes me a little bit more confident on the matter. We'll continue to go down here. Jonathan Taylor yardage, that could potentially be an under. I might put together an unders list here that may give ourselves an opportunity at succeeding. We'll have to kind of keep an eye on that as we proceed. Rolling down, what else do we got here? Anything that's like out of the norm, like an incredibly advantageous number? Like, I wouldn't mind grabbing a tight end here and hoping he gets over 13 receiving yards. It's not a bad, it's pretty much a coin toss because really it's one reception in that regard. Going down, let's see here. Cam Newton rushing yards, that's got to be over. 30 rushing yards is not going to be something of a difficulty for Cam Newton, in my opinion. I think he will certainly be running the ball a consistent amount like he has done throughout his entire career. So that, in my opinion, especially on his first game back as the starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers against his former head coach, it's going to be an exciting one to say the very least. I think Dan Arnold, he smashed this number every single week here. And he also has, yes, a difficult matchup, but he's got the eye of Trevor Lawrence. This isn't a bad number at 45.5 there. Quite an interesting number, to be totally honest. Is there any touchdowns? Let's see here. Is there a touchdown? Let's see here. Where is it? Okay, so passing touchdowns there, and then receiving touchdowns for Tyreek Hill. I'll take the over there. I needed to function it so that I could find that number exactly. I'll take also the over on CeeDee Lamb receiving yards and receptions. Oh, I can't take both because I can only have one of the two. We'll take the receiving yards total. All right. We've put together a pretty big slip here. $10 this sucker. Try to 5 times our money this week. Taking Sammy Watkins over on receiving yards. Joe Flacco over on interceptions. Cam Newton over on rushing yards. I'll take a Tyreek Hill touchdown again. He's kind of been inconsistent. Every other week he scores. Hopefully this isn't the off week, especially against Dallas of all defenses. And we'll take CeeDee Lamb with Amari Cooper out. Submit this lineup. And let's go ahead. And now that we've put together some pick'em slips, of course, draft a team for this upcoming Sunday's Battle Royale. Again, you draft amongst 5 other players. You pick a team with 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 1 flex, 2 wide receivers, and a running back. And you go ahead and try to dominate the entire fantasy landscape in order to win some big prizes. Let's check that out right now. So as you can see on screen, we are here and we are about to draft. We currently have the 6th pick out of 6 teams, but my current strategy for going into this upcoming weekend is, of course, to draft multiple teams. This current contest, I think, has like a giant prize pool, but it's only a $5 buy-in because there's so many teams that go ahead and throw their hat into the mix. Either way, my current strategy for this upcoming weekend, especially when you are drafting at the back end of the first, because if I have the number 1 pick, you guys all know I'm taking Christian McCaffrey number 1, because that is currently my number 1 running back on the week. Either way, at the back end of the first, I want to go ahead and probably grab the best available wide receivers or even Travis Kelce and ignore the running back position, because I know as people address the running back position, wow, that guy auto-picked Josh Allen first. That is actually really good because the trickle-down value going back in my direction certainly helps. But typically people, oh my God, they're taking wide receivers. Maybe I might get some running backs. Okay. Again, the whole point of drafting is kind of adjusting to what people do, right? And based on what I've seen already, maybe we don't start wide receiver. Maybe we have to take, a Dalvin Cook that is, primed and ready. Again, he's coming off of a 19-point fantasy game in the last 2 times that he's played against the Green Bay Packers defense. Never mind, Dalvin Cook's gone. Okay, just when I thought. But either way, the last 2 times he's played against the Green Bay Packers defense, he's certainly found a lot of success overall. What do we got here? I mean, this guy probably takes running. Okay, Nick Chubb, that makes sense, absolutely. Now it is my turn. Do I want to invest in Jonathan Taylor? Like I mentioned, I want to go wide receiver this week. So let's go ahead. Let's take Devontae Adams. Let's follow that up by either going Deebo Samuel or A.J. Brown. I took A.J. Brown earlier this week in another draft, so I want to kind of diversify my overall roster. So we'll go ahead and we'll take Deebo this time around. Again, we're establishing 2 wide receivers early because you can draft 3 overall wide receivers in your team, 2 as your starters and 1 as your flex, which is probably something that I'm going to do. So next time we come around, I'll most likely go ahead, draft another wide receiver, then a tight end, and then proceed to take my lone running back followed by my wide receiver as my final 2 picks. Now, the reason I want to go ahead and do that is because I look at the running back position, I think to myself, well, typically you could go ahead and invest early on some of these running backs, but they're not always going to have great performances. But you can go ahead and perhaps grab a Mark Ingram, maybe grab a Jeff Wilson Jr. and get incredible performances out of them in a singular week, which typically you won't see because they're not given said opportunity, or there isn't those pre-existing injuries that go ahead and impose those kind of touches for them. Either way, that's kind of my game plan right now. Solidify 3 wide receivers and a tight end. Grab one of these undervalued running backs late with a great quarterback. Because again, when you're drafting amongst 6 teams during the Sunday slate, I mean, there are fantastic quarterbacks across the board. The first team already had taken, he's currently still on auto pick. He's already taken his quarterback. It'll just take the best available player for him going forward. But if Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott are there for me, I'm absolutely going to grab one of them if I'm able to. Now, where am I looking with my next pick? Of course, I would have loved to potentially have CeeDee Lamb back, drop back down to me, but that is obviously a request that most likely isn't something that is going to happen. But Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, these are automatic pickups if they come back down to me. Outside of that, when we look at the tight end position, Travis Kelce, George Kittle are still remaining on the board, which is also still exciting. With Marquise Brown out, I think Mark Andrews even gets a little bit of a boost in terms of his overall presence of opportunity. I've talked about it this season already in comparison to the best season of Mark Andrews' career, which was in 2019 when Lamar Jackson had his MVP season. Mark Andrews is getting a significant boost in terms of overall target share in that respective offense, which was already high at that point, but has continued to rise over the years. All right, let's see here. Are these guys going to take wide receiver? This gentleman has already taken a wide receiver. He goes ahead and invests in tight end. This guy's taking 2 running backs. He has to go wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback here because he's invested in his top running back and his flex position. Let's see. Is Justin Jefferson going to be available? Chances are probably not, which will force me to probably have to invest in someone that is a sneakier option. Or maybe there is a chance. Maybe there is a possibility in which I may get Justin Jefferson here. Knowing my luck, this guy right now is going to take Justin Jefferson right in front of my face instead of one of the available running backs. That's probably my luck. But either way, we'll go ahead and see how this kind of, imagines itself out here. Come on. Do me the solid. Take the running back. Ooh, he took T. Higgins. By all means. Thank you very much, good sir. I'll take my Justin Jefferson there. And like I was explaining, I'll probably go tight end here. We have George Kittle available. We have Darren Waller available. George Kittle has been on fire, but I don't know if I want to have Jeff Wilson, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle all on the same roster. So for this specific scenario, we'll go ahead. If we're going to go Darren Waller here, George Kittle. Let's go Darren Waller in this regard. Let's take Darren Waller here. I know he didn't drop a touchdown. He had a touchdown called back last week due to a penalty on the offensive line. We'll be fine. I mean, as of right now, if I was starting this team in a regular fantasy league, I would expect myself to win this week, bar none. But now the question remains, what are the remaining quarterbacks that are left on the board, and what are the remaining running backs left? A.J. Dillon's still here. Joe Mixon's still here. The fact that I could probably come back at the end of this draft and may even be able to get one of these guys is ridiculous. And that's why I wanted to invest so quickly in wide receiver because that position kind of dries up after a while, considering teams have the ability to draft 3 of them. Michael Pittman coming off the board. Again, when I look at the top bar here, this team hasn't selected a running back. I mean, he would probably grab 1, maybe 2 if I'm unlucky in that regard. But it looks like wide receiver and quarterback has been the target of demand as of late. We'll have to go ahead and see where this gentleman goes. He'll most likely, based on point projection, considering he's been auto-drafting, get A.J. Dillon in this regard. I mean, being able to get A.J. Dillon as your 4th pick, I mean, off the week he just had, whew, you might as well at this point. But either way, guys, I'm telling you, it's another fun way to play fantasy football. If you use promo code Andrew today, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100 of your first deposit. I mean, you can go ahead and play these $5 contests, and if you are able to just be better than 55-60% of the overall community that goes ahead and joins this contest, you're going to get your money back minimum and then some. I mean, the amount of weekly contests, whether it's Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, that I'm able to win is actually kind of jarring to an extent. I've already shown you guys screenshots. I've been in that top 100 overall race for the last couple weeks now, and of course I'm trying to get closer and closer to reigning supreme at the very top. We'll see how everything kind of pans out here. The gentleman's already taken a running back. You probably will address either wide receiver, running back, or tight end here. If Joe Mixon falls to me, I mean, I'm not mad. Joe Mixon's taken. That was my expectation. Again, I'm expecting to either have Mark Ingram or Jeff Wilson as my running back. I'll probably go with Mark Ingram because he does play against Philly. And, why not at that point? Especially considering Kamara is out for another consecutive week. I think Mark Ingram, let's see here, had himself 18.8 fantasy points, 4 catches, 61 yards, 47 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Overall, great. This gentleman's already taken 2 running backs. This one has only taken 1. So if he is going to completely destroy my entire plan, this would be the final moment to do so. Let's hope he doesn't. If he does, again, the entire point of fantasy football is to audible during these drafts and go ahead and pick up players that may give you an opportunity. And that's why I didn't take George Kittle. Okay, there's George Kittle anyway. All right, speaking of the devil, we'll take Mark Ingram here. We'll close out by looking at the quarterback position. Tannehill, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray. I don't know if Kyler Murray's going to play. That is the biggest concern for me at this moment. So we'll take Jalen Hurts. We'll see if he can get some garbage time. And this is my team right now. Jalen Hurts, Mark Ingram, 3 stud wide receivers, and a stud tight end. Again, thank you everybody for watching. We'll go ahead and now transition back to our hidden gems and close out the video with a snap. Once again, thank you for Underdog Fantasy for helping us, of course, collect these 6 hidden gems across the fantasy football landscape. Again, use promo code Andrew, and with your first deposit, Underdog Fantasy is willing to match up to $100. These are our 6 hidden gems for this upcoming week. Of course, Michael Gallup, Adam Trautman, Foreman, Rashod Bateman, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Kenny Golladay. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and until tomorrow, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, kick off with Kirchhoff live stream. I'll see you guys. Peace.